Rich in Victorian and Federation architecture, with a National Trust and Heritage listing, King Street Newtown is one of the few remaining examples of a Victorian high street left in Sydney. Sadly neglected for many years, there has been in recent times a move by community and interested groups to preserve its unique character. The move to preserve King Street was given further impetus by the decision of the Department of Planning to include King Street in its Main Street program. As a result of this listing, a Main Street committee was set up to promote and coordinate the work of conservation. High on its list of priorities was the undergrounding of the overhead power cables, and an approach was made to Sydney Electricity for its help in this matter. As the cost of undergrounding the overhead low-voltage construction in King Street was prohibitive, Sydney Electricity considered the possibility of fixing aerial bundled conductors directly to the building facade. The matter was referred to the Distribution Support Branch, and following a feasibility study, it was decided to carry out a pilot project to prove the viability of the proposal and to accurately assess the costs involved. Subsequently, a 550-metre section of King Street was chosen between Missenden Road and Newtown Station. One of the advantages of this section was that it contained almost every problem ever likely to be encountered in a project of this type. Before planning got underway, the section of street was carefully photographed and the resultant photos closely studied. This allowed most of the problems to be identified and solutions found before construction work commenced. It also provided a record of the condition of the building facades prior to construction, should there be any subsequent dispute with the owners. Of particular concern to the planners was the safety of staff working on the project. Before the start of work, a thorough examination of all the shop awnings, many of them over 100 years old, was carried out to pinpoint any safety hazards, and where there was any doubt about the structural sufficiency of the awning, all work was carried out with the use of an elevated platform vehicle. It was important to the success of the project that the public be made fully aware of what was proposed and to put to rest any fears that they might have about the proposal. A display showing the concept of facade-mounted aerial bundled conductors was put together with the assistance of the Main Street Committee and located in a major bank. Local newspapers also ran articles on the project, and a letter drop detailing the advantages of the project was personally made to local shopkeepers and residents by the Main Street Committee coordinator. A document detailing Sydney Electricity's construction program was then hand-delivered to owners and tenants of all the affected properties, asking if there were any objections to the project. None were received. In planning the network, scrupulous care was taken to keep to a minimum the visual impact of facade-mounted aerial bundled cables. Where practical, cable runs were kept to no more than 600 millimetres above shop awnings, and underground cable connections to overhead cables were moved downside streets. If possible, conductors were placed behind downpipes and parapets, and where possible, architectural features of buildings were utilised to conceal the cable. Throughout the project, installation crews were given the opportunity for job input and encouraged to find their own solutions to minor problems encountered in erecting the cable. These included shop awnings of different heights, downpipes, air conditioners, windows, balconies, and numerous other obstacles. After the conductor route had been marked out, crews began fixing the conductor supports. Pulleys were then attached to the awning supports and the conductors pulled in and cut to length. The cable was then pulled tight while the retaining straps were fastened. Strain clamps were used to support the cables if there was no facade or where the nature of the facade material prevented the use of conventional conductor support brackets. To cross a road reserve or side street, conductors were taken back along the side of the building, clear of the building corner, and supported by strain clamps to give the required 4.6 metre clearance across the road reserve. Each section of the cable was joined using compression lugs insulated with heat shrink tubing. As the facade-mounted aerial bundled cables were erected and energised, individual consumer mains were swung over to the new system. If the customer was prepared to tolerate a short supply interruption, the point of attachment was lowered to improve the aesthetics of the building facade. The removal of the overhead low voltage and street lighting mains meant that the existing traffic route lighting scheme would have to be connected to the low voltage system. To contain costs, individual photoelectric cells were installed adjacent to existing lanterns where possible, rather than replace all the existing lanterns as had been past practice. To soften the aesthetic impact, the power supply for individual lanterns was laid across the top of the awning and then either up the pole or directly into the steel standard. When working on awnings, it is recommended that a 3 to 5 meter lightweight extension ladder be used, as it can easily and safely be handled by one person. The standard issue 4 to 7 meter linesman's ladder requires 2 people to maneuver on a shop awning, making the task both difficult and dangerous, as well as being less efficient. Because of the heavy traffic through Newtown, arrangements were made with the local police to control traffic while the old mains and services were disconnected. This unavoidable interruption was kept to a minimum by carefully planning the removal of the mains with the police. After the removal of the mains and services, the cross arms were dismantled and the poles trimmed to standard street lighting pole height and capped. In a brief ceremony on the 2nd of August 1992, the Minister for Energy, Mr. Gary West, cut away the last service in this section of King Street, much to the pleasure of local residents, the Main Street Coordinating Committee and South Sydney and Marrickville councils. Sydney Electricity is currently involved with local authorities in planning similar projects. For further information on facade-mounted aerial bundled cables, please contact Peter Hosford on telephone 02 269 4160 or fax 269 4780.